Good morning, it's Christopher Taylor with Sovereign Harmony up on the hills Sunday morning, October 19th. We're going to do the astrology for October 19th to the 25th. Lots going on this week, so I'm just going to kind of split it up, start with one thing, go to the next. So the first thing we got coming up this week, we've got a new moon at 28 degrees Libra. That'll be Tuesday the 21st, okay? That is going to oppose Chiron in Aries, as well as square Jupiter in Cancer. So that square between Chiron in Aries and Jupiter in Cancer essentially is with us for most of October. It'll be with us again in December. And what this has to do with, if you've been watching these videos the last few weeks, this has to do with emotional growth through vulnerability. Okay, so this new moon in Libra is highlighting that. And what it's doing is establishing this new sense of relationship with ourselves in response to this new growth in terms of our vulnerability. So we're not allowing our vulnerability to prevent us from growing, but we're also not going to deny that it's there. So this is part of our growth. And this wants to take us forward into what's coming in 2026, which I've talked about a lot. Okay, so we're in this goo phase, right? And that's a lot of what this Jupiter Chiron square has to do with, between that caterpillar we left behind with the eclipses here in September and the butterfly that's coming with the eclipses in February, March. Okay, and that sets up with the Saturn-Neptune conjunction at 0 degrees Aries, which is this whole new point of societal evolution. Okay, so we're forming the birth of this new relationship with ourselves now that will be utilized later, but we can't get there until we deal with what needs to be released. And I mentioned those eclipses back in September, especially that Pisces lunar eclipse, like a power wash, like a high pressure wash, flushing out what needs to get flushed out so we have room for this new relationship with ourselves that wants to come with this new energy in 2026. Okay, and so with this, we also have the sun a couple days later on Wednesday will enter Scorpio, where it's going to form a square to Pluto in Aquarius. Now, a sun in Scorpio squaring Pluto in Aquarius will be with us for 20 years now. Okay, so this time of year, every year, that will happen. And it's part of a gradual process of dealing with what needs to be released so we can move into the future. And so now we have a more focused aspect of that theme happening right now as well. On Wednesday, in addition, we'll have Neptune, which is retrograde right now in Aries. It'll back into Pisces at 29 degrees Pisces. That's the critical degree, final degree of Pisces. And it'll be sitting at 29 degrees through late January. So 3 months of Neptune at 29 degrees Pisces. Neptune is a ruler of Pisces. So we have this exaggerated theme of final endings and release. Okay, with Pisces, Neptune, and the 29th degree in general representing endings. So we have a triple ending happening. Okay, and with Neptune in Pisces since 2011, that's when it first entered, 2011, 2012, this was the start of some grand deceptions globally, okay? And it coincides in the US with the passing of what was known as the Smith-Mundt Modernization Act. So what that was a modernization of an act that happened in the 1940s, which basically said that intelligence agencies in the US could not use propaganda against US citizens. What happened in 2012 was that they said, oh, wait a minute, yes, we can. Yes, we can use propaganda against American citizens. So we've been in this with, the CIA involvement in the media, etc., since about 2012 with Neptune in Pisces. Okay, so there's been lots of propaganda in the media, whereas before that, the media was more or less, spitting out what was happening in the world, right? And we had more of an ability to decipher for ourselves what we want to think about that, how we want to feel about that. Since that passage of that act in 2012, this Neptune in Pisces, it has been more about telling us what to feel about things, telling us what we should think about things, dividing the people into two camps, right? That's really what the function has been. But with Neptune backing into the 29th degree of Pisces, we're in the grand finale of that, okay? So expect the next few months to feature attempts at really, gaslighting the public, trying to manipulate the public into believing certain things and what we're supposed to feel about that and what we're supposed to think about that. But because Saturn is sitting there in late degrees of Pisces as well, it's kind of the correction of the deception energy. I hate to say fact check because that term has been kind of confiscated, and it's more, fact checking is more narrative reinforcement, which would be more like, emphasizing what Neptune and Pisces is doing with the deception. Saturn in Pisces is a correction of that deception. Okay, so it's a way to make sure that we are we are correcting when there's a deception, we immediately correct it, okay? And that's what that's going to function as, okay? So just watch out for that the next few months. Another big thing that's happening here in this general theme, so while we're in this power wash time in between these eclipses here, between the fall and next spring, is we've got today, in fact, it's exact today, Mercury and Mars are conjunct in Scorpio. This is about diving deep. This is about aligning thoughts, ideas with action. And this is about getting to the bottom of things, okay? And this Mars-Mercury relationship is going to last for several weeks, okay? Because Mercury is entering the shadow zone on Tuesday, the 22nd here, or 21st here. It'll enter the shadow zone of its retrograde that's coming up, which will be November 9th to November 29th. And that will take it from 6 degrees Sagittarius or so back to about 20 degrees of Scorpio. So what's happening this week is that Mercury's entering 20 degrees of Scorpio with Mars in tow. Okay, so they're with each other as Mercury enters the shadow zone for the retrograde zone that it will cover. And then on November 12th, they're going to meet again in Sagittarius, this time at the end of the shadow zone, okay, at about 6 degrees Sagittarius. So 20 degrees Scorpio, 6 degrees Sagittarius, that forms the entire transect of where Mercury will be retrograding from November 9th to the 29th. And Mars will be with Mercury here at the beginning when it enters that zone, and then right when it turns retrograde, okay? Almost like it says, all right, I'm going back. Nice to join you. You're moving forward. I'll catch up with you later. And they'll catch up actually again in January in Capricorn. But so this Mercury-Mars conjunction is really about, again, combining ideas and thoughts with action. So we're not just thinking about things, we're doing things, okay? So on the front end here, it's about diving in and trying to figure out, excavate essentially, what is the truth? What are the things that are hidden in that closet, essentially, that we need to get to, okay? And then when it's in Sagittarius, it's more about like, wow, like now that we know what we know, what can we do with this? Where can we go with this? Okay, Sagittarius wants to like expand beyond the horizons, okay? So once we explore the hidden things that prevent us from doing that, then we're free to do that, right? So the theme of that Mercury retrograde is going to be a lot about recognizing what our possibilities are, and then going back to figure out how we can clear the way for that to happen, okay? And so Mars is helping. Mars is helping this Mercury retrograde very strongly, okay? And what's also interesting is at the end of this week, so Mercury and Mars join right about now, beginning of the week. Then Mercury's moving a little faster, so Mars will lag behind. Mercury's going to form a trine to Jupiter in Cancer, which we just talked about, which is squaring Chiron and Aries, and then also a trine in Saturn and Pisces, which we talked about before too. So this Jupiter-Saturn trine is going to be with us for the whole month of November, plus and minus the edge of October, edge of December as well. So that theme really is a very potentially positive theme of, of expanding the structure, okay? It's growth that's based on facing reality. Okay, that's Jupiter, growth, Saturn facing reality. So again, Saturn in Pisces wants to correct any deceptions. That's its job in Pisces. Okay, so it's allowing Neptune to come back into Pisces and the attempts to deceive on a mass scale, and then Saturn corrects it. And then Jupiter is that growth that comes from that. Okay, Jupiter's in Cancer, like from the U.S. perspective, that's the U.S. has a sun in Cancer, right? This is a time of growth for, at least in terms of American sensibilities and whatnot, but based on facing the facts that need to be corrected, okay? Any deceptions that need to be corrected with facts, I should say, okay? But Mercury is going to stimulate that trine by forming a grand trine later this week. Then Mars is going to follow next week. Then the Sun in mid-November, then Venus, okay? So it's going to be a train of these planets, these personal planets forming that trine. We're really anchoring in this growth that is based on facing reality and getting rid of those deceptions for good. Okay, and then Mercury, when it's done with its retrograde, will form another trine. So it kind of encapsulates those personal planets. Anyway, we'll leave it there. Thanks for joining me up on the hill. We'll see you next week. If you have any questions, do ask. You can always get a personal reading from me as well, see where these planets are happening for you. But other than that, enjoy your Sunday and enjoy your week. We'll see you next time.